Do you know our friends over at Dark Horizons? They're also haters. They just blasted Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy with, the usual complaints.
Everybody does.
Well, yeah, most everybody does. And the first word you hear is bloat. Bloated. That's the first criticism.
That's exactly what fans want.
But that's the point.
That's
That's exactly right.
Can you flip the screen so
That's
we can
exactly what we should
see
understand.
ourselves?
It's like, fan service is not an unusual phenomenon with this filmmaker. You know what I mean? In fact, it's what we love about it.
How
Hello, everybody.
How to stop worrying about Tolkien and love Peter Jackson again.
Thank you. Today's episode of Torn Tuesday now starts live. As you heard from the background chit-chat we're having as we settle down at our anchor desk, welcome, Justin and Clifford. Here we are, your two co-hosts for mischief, merriment, and a little bit of scholarly, semi-scholarly discussion about what's happening in the state of Tolkien fandom. Things are motivated in all kinds of different directions because we've got our hands on the Blu-ray of Battle of the Five Armies. Now we have all 6 films all together. And we're talking about things in a much bigger contextual light. But you know what? Haters be hatin', as they say.
Non-stop.
And on the subject of today's Torn Tuesday, we welcome you to join us as we explore the haters of Peter Jackson. And I like this opening title. You said, how to, learn to stop worrying and love the bomb. I'm a little Dr. Strangelove tease going on there. I love it, by the way. Did you know that at the time when Kubrick came out with that film, it was the longest subtitle in the history of motion picture films? Did you know that?
I believe it.
To be replaced by Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, Lord of the Apes, which then became, until The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, the most word-stuffed title and subtitle of an entire motion picture ever. But we love these things.
And if you're just joining us, we're live on Ustream.
You better believe we're live.
At theonering.net/live, where you can join the chat room.
Yes.
And we've got a lot of our wonderful guests, Spirited Book, and Marvels, Aravandi, Stephanie Tolkien Girl, Emily, Sarah, Rovandir. Great to see a lot of our regulars. Also,
always great to see you.
We're gonna open up the chat room.
I've got here.
The phone lines a little later. 530-64 Frodo. You should see a scrolling text bar.
For Frodo.
You should see the scrolling text bar. But you can text us. Text us throughout the show, and then we'll open up the phone lines a little bit later. And I think the Skype lines, if Cliff can get it working. Every time we post something about Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy on our Facebook page, it turns into this bash fest against Peter Jackson. Even if it's something confrontational, like, oh, check out this awesome behind-the-scenes picture of Toriel, or check out this thing that happened with these worms, and people just go on our Facebook
with the great wereworms.
Yeah. And there's just so much hate, like Peter Jackson bastardized our beloved, and it's always like half and half, 50-50 vitriol against Peter Jackson.
But what need for vitriol?
At this point.
What need for it? Exactly.
At this point.
Why the contention? This is what we're going to talk about today. Continue.
Yeah, and we've seen this happen before in fandom, and it happened in Star Wars fandom when the prequels came out of Star Wars prequels, and we started to see a lot of hate for George Lucas, to the point where if you go to YouTube...
Oh gosh, the internet was very unkind to Lucas.
It still is.
When the prequels came out,
and
yes.
If you go to YouTube, search for George Lucas Raped My Childhood, and there's songs and music videos and explanatory. I mean, there's 4-hour breakdowns, visual breakdowns of the Star Wars prequels that just frame by frame completely wreck the films, and that no one takes a step back and appreciates what happened. And I feel like fandom's going down this road with Peter Jackson, so we want to take this opportunity. Let's take a look at what fans are saying, and let's talk about what we know the intentions of the filmmakers.
Yes. Down.
I know, we're streaming live.
We are always streaming live. Hello.
Yeah,
live
one or
audience.
the other.
Nice to, well,
and as usual,
come join us.
we're
Join us.
always at Meltdown Comics Hollywood, right in the heart of Hollywood.
The grand mecca of all geekdom here in the heart of Hollywood.
And there's so much.
Ring, you get 10% off.
Mention the One Ring, you get 10% off
Lest we forget.
anything in
Yes.
the store.
Who's one of the biggest haters in the camp of Peter Jackson haters?
Who?
Christopher Tolkien.
But the people that are
there's a chain of command coming from somewhere.
but
We're just saying.
fans never quote Christopher Tolkien. Like this is
They
a
often
genuine
do.
fandom, and so like we just have to like take a step back, take a breather. This morning I tweeted that the bashing of Peter Jackson is getting old and tired.
I would agree with that.
And it as tired as like hating on George Lucas. I mean, it's not even fun anymore.
Not fun.
And the movies serve a place and serve a purpose, and they reached an audience, a new audience.
That was considerable.
That was huge.
Yes, that
And
was huge.
Let's, I know a lot of people will say money isn't everything, but you don't get to $1 billion a movie like the Hobbit trilogy did without doing something right. And all the Hobbit movies, when you count in global box office plus DVD sales, each of them hit $1 billion. And if you look at many other book translations, from the Golden Compass to even stuff like Jupiter Ascending, sci-fi things, all the pieces should be there.
Yes.
They're not, and they fail. And there's something to be said about Peter Jackson being able to make $1 billion movie 3 times out of a single little book, and that's a hard task, but it works. There aren't a lot of plot holes in Peter Jackson's Hobbit. It stands on its own when grouped as 3, and and we think that there is an order that all fans from here on out should watch the Middle Earth anthology, and we'll talk about that later.
It's not an anthology.
What do you call it?
Well, you'd call it a sextet or a hexology.
No one's calling it that.
The marketing department at Warner Brothers is calling it a saga.
Saga.
The Middle-earth Saga.
They call Star Wars a saga.
But I think somebody, either Daily Variety, no, was it Variety? Might have been Hollywood Reporter, but in one of the reviews of the Battle of the Five Armies, they actually used the word sextet, considering the 6 films together. I would call it a hexology, but that no one does. There is definitely a place for the films and a purpose that they serve.
Mm-hmm.
It is now part of a bigger conversation that fans are having in how you introduce very young or brand new consumers, brand new readers to this world, this cinematic world. And the debate simply could be either A, you introduce them to the films the way we saw them theatrically, when all the movies came out in, 2000, 2001, and you watch Lord of the Rings first, and then you let them absorb and see what kind of a masterpiece of filmmaking that is, and then you get them to see the prequel trilogy, or quote-unquote, The Hobbit, the prequel trilogy, but that gives a different flavor and gives a different taste.
The problem
because
is,
it's backwards references in the Hobbit films that we watch and say, oh, these are backwards references to Lord of the Rings. This problem that you're about to mention is completely gone. It evaporates. It doesn't exist if you bring a newbie into the Hobbit films first, which is an exercise I'm doing with a good friend of mine at work. I got a good friend of mine at work, and did I tell you this quick story? And I want you all to hear this. This is very, very, very interesting. I handed him a boxed set of the Lord of the Rings, all 3, the Blu-rays, and I said, here, these stories are so fantastic, I can't believe you've never seen them before. Check these out, you can borrow these and enjoy. And then I started telling him, oh, here's a little bit of background on these characters, blah, 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 and here's Christopher Lee, Saruman, he's going to turn into a villain in the first 10 minutes of the film, and I said, when you go and watch the Hobbit films, you'll get to see him as a good guy before he becomes a traitor, and a few other things.
Spoiler.
How about that? And he 2 days later, he gave me the whole box set right back to me. And he said, Thank you. I think I should start with the Hobbit films first. It was his choice. I did give him the option to start with Rings because other fans have said the Rings are stronger films. Don't let him watch quote unquote weaker films and not be charmed enough or intrigued enough that he would want to finish the whole story.
Tolkien girl in
How
the chat
about
room
that?
says she buries her face in her hands. I don't know if I'll be able to listen to this one tonight. Why? Because you think we're apologizing for the Hobbit series?
Not necessarily.
Back up your comment. Why wouldn't you want to listen to this conversation? Because it's not about defending something indefensible. It's about putting a perspective. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. It's about putting perspective. And here's the thing. When people say you should watch Lord of the Rings first and then watch the Hobbit trilogy, or you should watch the original Star Wars trilogy first and then watch the prequels, like
there's that conversation too.
They're trying to convince you to they're trying to create the memory that they had in you, and that never works. When your
so that's an overriding sense of nostalgia.
It's a nostalgia thing. So when your parents introduce you to their music and say, "Hey, here's John Denver's greatest hits. Listen to it." You are not going to have the same emotional reaction, even if you enjoy John Denver's music and you appreciate what your parents have just given you. You're not going to have the same emotional attachment. It's going to be disconnected because it's disconnected from where society was at the time when he was popular and he was hosting the Muppet Show. He was, number one on the charts month after month. John Denver was a superstar. But
he was a multi-platinum, multi-Grammy
huge
winning singer-songwriter.
We're talking like Lady Gaga level. He owned media.
Yes.
Radio, television, films.
There was nothing bigger than watching the John Denver and the Muppets Christmas special.
Huge.
Huger than huge. And which... A similar feat that was replicated by Lady Gaga not too far recently.
Anyone coming into John Denver now as a youngin',
they
will not fully appreciate why he was popular and the context of it. And so the same thing can be said about The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. New fans coming into it, they need to watch The Hobbit first because that's how the filmmakers intended. George Lucas and Peter Jackson have both been on the record numerous times saying all of my movies are supposed to be watched in order.
It is particularly interesting.
Period. End of story. That's it.
Particularly interesting when you listen to director's commentary track of Philippa Boyens and Peter Jackson on the extended edition of An Unexpected Journey. Near the end of the film, where we get to the out of the frying pan into the fire chapter, near the end, after they have escaped from the goblin caves and after Bilbo has escaped Gollum with his ring in his pocket, at that point on the director's commentary track, both of them say unequivocally that in our minds, always present in our minds, was that this material in these Hobbit films needed to be directly tied in to extant material that we've already put in our Lord of the Rings cinematic universe. And they talk about that in such a specific way. You know that there's no doubt that the newest viewers, like my friend at work, who's borrowing the Blu-rays from me, he has been texting me these fascinating questions saying, no, seriously. He's actually a newbie who's so engaged in the Hobbit films that he says, what is that broken sword that Bilbo's walking past? And what is that painting on the wall behind him?
Well, you'll find out.
And I say, you'll find out in movie number 4. Or he says other things like, why is the mountain and the gold in that mountain driving everyone crazy? What's wrong with Thorin? What's going on with him? And
there's more to Middle Earth than meets the eye.
And so he's actually getting caught up into the nuances of the narrative. And of course,
just like we did with Lord of the Rings.
I would, yeah, indeed. I would not argue any other fan, and there have been arguments with me recently on Facebook, that the best way to introduce people to Tolkien is to hand them the book and let them read The Hobbit first. Yes, I won't argue that point.
Nobody's going to read the book.
No,
they're going to watch the movie before. They're going to watch the movie before they read the book.
That's you. Speak for yourself.
That's
no.
people.
Maybe no. You can't.
Society
you can't
in 2015.
No.
You give people a DVD and a book, they're gonna watch that movie before they even read the book.
No, that's a sweeping generalization.
It is
I
a
wouldn't.
true.
No, I agree with what we're trying to say, but I don't agree with that little side point. The thing is, when you are introducing a newbie to these 6 films, I have discovered through this little experiment I'm doing on the side that there's a greater narrative strength with this person asking, who are those 9 spirits that are attacking Gandalf and Galadriel and Saruman? Who are those 9 spirits? And he's literally texting me things, and I know that by the time he gets to Fellowship of the Ring and hears Viggo Mortensen explain who they are, and that little bit of exposition gives him exactly what he wants to know, it is going to piece together a greater satisfaction of what he cinematically saw just a few days before. It is an interesting thing.
And Spirited Book puts it well in the chat room. She says, the thing is, you watch The Hobbit first. You might like it better just because you may think they were the originals or something. And that's right. Again, most people saying don't watch the Hobbit movies first, watch The Lord of the Rings, they're trying to impart on you their own memory. And we know that can never happen. Like, you cannot, someone will never have the same experience you did.
Indeed, that's very, very true. I would go as far as to say this. Newbies, whatever generation they are, I mean, my friend Jose happens to be very young 20-something. It's not like I'm introducing someone who's in their 40s to the Hobbit films.
Says the same thing. Some of my non-fanboy friends prefer the Hobbit because it's easier to jump into.
It's easier to jump into,
if you're not like wholly invested in the universe.
Yes.
Exactly. Or the legendarium. So his fans, his casual fans, and his casual say The Hobbit's an easier movie to just jump into. They're fun movies. I can have, I know all the characters, and so that's the purpose of the Hobbit series. And Peter Jackson wanting to extend one little book into 3 movies. Yes, give us that. We want it. We deserve it. And you can add your little flourishes because people will come back to the book. The more, someone said to me, the more he changes the book, the more he changes stuff in the film, the more people will actually fully appreciate Tolkien's book.
There's something to that.
There is something to that. It's a reverse psychology thing where people come into Middle Earth and the Hobbit story through the films, through these $3 billion blockbusters, and then they start reading or start rereading, because a lot of people maybe were forced to read in school and now are revisiting the story, and they have a deeper appreciation for Tolkien's work. So everybody wins.
This is what Jose said while watching the Battle of the Five Armies. Language warning. Oh shit. Gandalf knew about the ring, but why didn't he ever take it back? He's curious to know why Gandalf, who is being rather, avuncular, as he usually is, and protective of Bilbo, and wants to make sure that he's all right. Jose is enough of a new fan that he's engaged to ask questions about characters' motivations and their behaviors and things that are not clear to him. He wants to know. And you know what he said? I said, in response to that, I said Gandalf knew it was a magic ring, but he didn't know what kind of a ring or how dangerous it was at all. But he's aware of many, many things. To which this newbie replied, but when does he find out about the Ring of Sauron? When does Gandalf make this connection? He's already anticipating that Gandalf is going to make the connection that ring is the Ring of Sauron, because I've already told him, literally. The filmmaker is letting you know that there's something going on. A total newbie hearing the dragon Smaug make a comment about the ring, you're carrying something else, something golden that you have on your person, something precious. Remember that? And there's a miniature flash between the dragon's eye and Sauron's eye. And Peter Jackson is deliberately giving the newbies.
Them.
He's putting the narrative together
without like beating
Yes.
them over the head
Yes.
with exposition.
Yes. I
It's
think
a
it's
tease that makes the Lord of the Rings trilogy still great
still great.
without spoiling anything.
Without spoiling anything, yeah. So it's a bit of masterful filmmaking to know that you're putting in these little slivers and threads that you know have to weave into your previous existing 3 films. I think it's fascinating.
I'm so
actually.
glad that we have people in the chat room like Tolkien Girl who says, frustratingly says,
Makes frustrated noises. That's so cute.
I just
That's
don't
very
like
cute.
the Hobbit movies,
Very
okay?
cute.
I could sit here all day and debate with you why they're awful, why I've lost faith in Peter Jackson. I respect the opinions here,
Okay.
but I strongly disagree.
That's okay. It's
And
good
they
to have.
actually get-
I appreciate a disagreement, and I appreciate your very intellectual and way of telling us that you've got a disagreement. What we have a problem with is some of the flaming trolls that are on our Facebook
But
threads,
it's more
just
than just
attacking theonering.net
No,
or me or other people
It's beyond that.
for even liking
It's-
Peter
it's
Jackson.
Not even it's not even tagging
mean-
because Tolkien Girl then goes on. Fact of the matter is, Lord of the Rings is better than The Hobbit, leagues
Yes.
better, and the
Yeah,
books
they're better
are
films.
leagues better than either set of the movies.
Yes,
Well,
yes, that's
guess
true.
what?
The books will always be there.
Fact of the matter is, the Lord of the Rings books are leagues better than the Hobbit book. Leagues. The Lord of the
that's
Rings
true.
was so good that that Tolkien himself had to go and retcon parts of his
And
books.
he had to revise The
And-
Hobbit to bring it up to speed with his masterwork,
So,
his real masterpiece.
so your statement that the Lord of the Rings
The
films
Rings.
are better than the Hobbit films, true. But so are the books. The Lord of the Rings is way better than the Hobbit book. And
Yes.
you've got to agree with me.
I do,
And
I do
you
agree.
love the Hobbit.
I do. I love myself some Silmarillion, but I think The Lord of the Rings, as a fully fleshed out novel, is a better work. The Silmarillion was an incomplete, rather archaically styled historical accounting. Not
Marvel's-
written as a novel. Not even written the way a novel would be written. Although it does have some moments of powerful storytelling, but still not put together in the polished way. It took him about 17 years to finish polishing up The Lord of the Rings, get it to where he wanted it to be. Professor Tolkien,
That bumper must have been shiny. Like he spent a lot of time
it's very
polishing.
shiny. Shiny is platinum.
That's why Lord of the
very
Rings
shiny.
is the Lord of the Rings.
That's why it is. But
It's polished.
I can, hey, Tolkien Girl, and any of our other fans who want to debate
Well,
the merits
even
of the Hobbit
Marvel's
films.
in the chat room says, justify Alfred and Tauriel, guys. I dare you. Again, if you
I can't defend the Alfred character. The Alfred character is just a bit too much. But I will
it
defend.
doesn't mean that it's a terrible movie.
It doesn't make it a
'cause
terrible movie.
It's
just a distracting Jar Jar type character. It's okay. I can live through that. What
as bad as Jar Jar.
But what I find interesting is that the writer and directors give us a moment to see where Alfred's greatest failing is. He doesn't get squished by a dragon. He doesn't get speared or killed by orcs. What does Alfred have as a moment that concludes his character arc? Well, he runs off sniveling in drag with, stealing gold coins in his brassiere.
Straight out of Robin Hood.
Straight out
Disney's
of
Robin Hood.
Straight out of Disney's Robin Hood, which is
Little
probably
John
the
running
joke.
away from.
Yeah, Little John in the girl's outfit with the gold boobs, with all the gold coins in his boobs. It's very
Spilling
funny.
out.
I think it's funny. But the Alfred character exists for one point to make a grace note of what Bard has as a complete family, a complete life, and a complete destiny, which is more secure and more satisfying than anything that Alfred could ever dream of having with his ill-gotten gold.
Sarah in the chat room says, Alfred was so fun.
Alfred is...
Yeah.
Well, sometimes it's fun, but I could have done without so much of his antics in the film, but I do understand at that one point, that last shot, where there's a judgment, where you can see there's that Bard and his family are standing there together, and they're shown as a unified family with the bond of love and truth and support that they have, but a character who has no integrity, and he will never have integrity. He'll never have that life, never have that family, and Alfred knows,
I think.
and that's how his character line ends. He knows, and perhaps he's disgusted with himself when he realizes he'll never have that graceful life of family and heritage that Bard has. And the filmmakers show that And they actually
I
in
think
the
you're-
middle of a very busy
think
movie.
I think you're way off on
No,
justifying Alfred.
I'm not justifying
I-
Alfred. I'm just saying I understand why
I feel like-
that moment was in there.
I
The
feel like
movie's very
everything-
busy, but they give us a moment anyways to have a little grace note about Bard. It therefore becomes more about Bard and his family than it is a statement about Alfred. In any case,
No,
but
I feel like Alfred's character could have been completely eliminated, and you just make the Master of Lake Town. Everything Alfred did,
Yeah,
if Stephen
that would've been
Fry,
fine.
if Stephen Fry had
Yeah.
done in Stephen Fry's
Yes.
wonderful
Yes.
level of performance
Yep.
that he is capable of, I think everything.
I would agree.
Everything that Peter Jackson and the writers Philippa and Fran wanted to do with the people of Lake Town, if they just taken everything Alfred did and just put it on Master of Lake Town,
I
no
would've-
one would have any complaints. In fact, I think people
I
would
would've-
be celebrated.
I would be.
I think everyone would been like,
I'd be
"That is
happier."
a great way of characterizing the Master of Lake Town. What a great job!" But instead, the Master of Lake Town is kind of a throwaway character.
I liked the Master of Lake Town. I wish I could have had more of him and a little bit less of the disgusting stuff that he was eating off of his plate. But Peter Jackson is having fun, and he gets to be like a little kid in a candy shop when he makes these gross things that are in his films. He likes doing that. I would agree. I would have preferred an amalgam character. Instead of all that extra Alfred
Jan-
stuff, I would have preferred what you just said. A whole bigger, more robust Master of Lake Town.
Just put everything
And
Alfred
he is very
did
robust
and,
already.
and give it to Jan says, I think Toriel has maybe the best scene in Desolation with Keely and the Stone. Keely, Toriel, the Stone in the jail, in the prison. That's probably
Talking
the
about
best
the
scene.
Festival of Starlight that's happening
Yes.
outside. Yeah.
He says that's probably the best scene in the entire Hobbit trilogy. There is a purpose to all that, and
That's funny. See, some of the fans say that this little love triangle between Fili, Tauriel, and Legolas is satisfying and interesting, but you go to other fan websites, like our friends at Dark Horizons, and they say the following. The tepid Tauriel, Legolas, Fili love triangle, not present in the novel, never rises above melodrama. The material that is sutured on to expand the project into a trilogy feels blatantly tacked on and inconsequential. At this point, it's fair to say that Jackson's weakness for narrative bloat has now officially defeated him. So, okay. Yeah,
Ouch.
That's a big ouchie slap in the face from Dark Horizons. And usually, geek websites are very supportive of Peter Jackson and his films. But not all fans are happy.
And that wasn't the That wasn't the intent
I'll
of
admit
Tauriel
that.
in the first place. Again, Tauriel was a creation by Fran Walsh when she was writing one-on-one with Guillermo del Toro.
Mm-hmm.
Tauriel made it all the way through to Peter Jackson's version of these stories.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at some point, Peter could have said, "You know what? I know Guillermo wanted to add a girl, but let's just not." But Peter said, "You know what? There's something of value here." Philippa and Fran, they filmed all that, and we've even interviewed Evangeline Lilly,
Mm-hmm.
who said that she loved the character when she was first sent the script, and yes, it was exactly what she wanted to do. And it wasn't until reshoots after the first movie had come out, they decided to do the whole trilogy instead of 2 movies. And on reshoots for Desolation, that's when they brought her back and they started introducing this gross love triangle. And that's not what Evangeline signed up for, but she was contractually obligated. And turns out it was a total misfire at the at the box office. I think Desolation made the lowest amount of money out of the whole trilogy of Hobbit films, and
Really?
and then they kind of backtracked and they pulled out on Battle of Five Armies. They kind of pulled out a lot of the romance angle that was there. Evangeline says that they filmed a lot of stuff near the lake. They filmed a lot of one-on-ones with her and Keely. You don't see it. We don't see
Really?
it yet. It's supposed
until the extended version
It may
comes
be
out.
in the extended version. But there's a good reason for Tauriel. They also changed, from what we understand, they also changed Tauriel's ending. Currently, in the current edit of Battle of Five Armies, Tauriel has to be rescued. So the most awesome warrior elf The one elf in all of Mirkwood that is like, it is our fight. We have to do this. I'm a warrior elf. This is what we're supposed to do. And at the end of the day, she is on the mountain with Bolg, and Legolas has to turn into Super Mario and come rescue our princess from another castle. That was a complete gross ruin. Like, that ruined the character for me. It doesn't mean the character was inappropriate. It doesn't mean the character was out of the spirit of Tolkien. It just means that they made some creative decisions at the last minute, and they changed their intention. If they'd stuck to what Fran Walsh originally wanted to do, and Guillermo del Toro wanted to do, was create an awesome warrior elf that takes the elves of Mirkwood into war and helps save the day. Like, they filmed it, it was there, and then they changed it. But it doesn't mean Tauriel needs to die. It doesn't mean Tauriel is the worst thing ever in the history of Tolkien. I think it would. What do you think? Do you think she is in the spirit of Tolkien?
Yes, I think the character is in the spirit of Tolkien.
And he knows his stuff. He's a published author. He's an award-winning screenwriter for Tolkien movies. He knows his stuff.
You're gonna get everyone saying, "I really like Tauriel, but I don't like what they did with the character," and that sounds like your summation. Is that something I hear frequently from conversations at fan events and WonderCon and other events? Did you hear that?
Like, on our Facebook page, the name Tauriel is equivalent to the name Jar Jar Binks. Like, they literally, you mention Tauriel on our Facebook page, and like the whole place explodes into the Peter Jackson is the worst, and he needs to go hang himself. It's like, no, Tauriel is Tolkien appropriate. She's true to the spirit of Middle Earth, and it was a necessary thing to create her. And we all know Tolkien allows for other stuff happening. He chose to focus on these characters because he was a product of his time, but he created a whole world.
Yes.
Full of characters that can play in it.
I don't have a problem with the Tauriel love triangle because it was unrequited. If the Tauriel Keeley love affair was consummated and it actually happened full on, then I'd have a problem with it, because that seems to be like a direction that the narrative would not even need to go.
And you can see in the edit, you can kind of see that the dwarf Keeley falls hopelessly in love with a girl that is so out of reach. She's not even interested.
He gets turned on by a guy elf at Rivendell and makes the mistake that it's a girl. All right.
Right. It's set up for success.
It is set up.
Her total character is set up for success.
If you watch the extended version of Unexpected Journey, you start to realize that we're dealing with Keeley, who happens to have a fetish. It's just like that joke that Kermit the Frog makes on the new commercial. He says, "What can I say? I'm attracted to pigs." You know, it's this, and there's a big joke with Miss Piggy and Kermit. It's a big joke, and we love this joke. But if Keeley has a fetish, if Keeley is totally into fetishizing female elves, he gets a lot of ribbing and he takes a lot of judgment from his other dwarven friends. When we watch the scene, the writers are setting it up to make it work. That he says, "Oh no, I'm not really into elven ladies. I'm not into that because I'm not. Yeah, they just look nice, but I'm not into that." And his brothers and his friends are ready to judge him for his weird fetish about liking elf girls, and they even have a laugh at his expense. So it seems like the fact that it's an unrequited love affair means that the writers are looking at another direction, and they're trying to make us think about what will cross boundaries of racial mistrust. Well, the best way to cross boundaries of racial mistrust and racial hatred is to have two people like Romeo and Juliet who are supposed to be enemies, like Romeo and Juliet, and they end up being attracted to each other when everyone else around them says, you guys are not supposed to be together. That's disgusting, and I'm going to judge you for being attracted to someone that you're not supposed to be with. That's kind of an interesting place to go with characters.
I don't think that's true to Tolkien. The interracial love thing, I don't think is true to Tolkien, but the character itself as she exists.
There are other interracial love. There are many other, a few. There's a few other interracial love affairs in Tolkien's legends.
So that didn't need to be added, and I think Tauriel gets more heat than required. You know, Richard Armitage.
Maybe so. Maybe she does get more heat than required.
Said in an interview, quoting Richard Armitage here, it was a female element that didn't exist in the books, which personally I don't think was necessary. But I appreciated the fact that they knew that this film would be watched by a lot of young people, and they wanted young girls and women to have a character that they could possibly relate to. I didn't worry too much about it, and I enjoyed the storyline myself, and I was happy to see it played out. That's Richard Armitage. Again, I think half of his statement can be thrown out. I think it's inappropriate to say we got to throw in the girls because girls need to have a character to look up to. Yeah, I'm telling you, you don't need that. The One Ring's web stats, 68% female. Like we don't need girls. Don't need girls to look up to. They just need good, strong characters with strong moral centers.
Yes.
And but I think people want to people are looking for all these different reasons to justify Tauriel. And look, what they did, what they ended up doing in the final edit is not justifiable. There should be no love triangle. She should have never fallen for the dwarf. The dwarf was falling for her. So there's no justifying that. It's a bad part of the movie, but it doesn't make the movie terrible. And it doesn't make her character irrelevant.
What would make it terrible is if those characters were put into other situations that would have been really, really antithetical to the world building that Professor Tolkien had already done. It's a tricky area because
Eravante, interracial romance, Thingol and Melian, Beren and Luthien, Aragorn and Arwen.
Mm-hmm.
Look, the Aragorn and Arwen, the ultimate love story. I mean, these are all interracial romances. We didn't need it in The Hobbit. It was enough just to create Tauriel. And I think what Guillermo del Toro wanted to do, and because Fran Walsh did the first the Guillermo's version,
Yes.
And then when Peter came on, Philippa, did a punch up. But I think Fran was on the right track. So back to the reason of this discussion, how to stop worrying about Tolkien and love Peter Jackson again, is that Peter's original intent was in the right place. I think he got caught up in this whole, we gotta, we gotta do something about the girls, and that's what happens when a creator starts listening to the data, the stats and the data. And I'm sure that he had his producers and the movie producers in the studio saying, well, our data shows that X amount of girls went to see the first movie, so when you're doing reshoots, you should start, because we all know girls love lovey-dovey stuff. It's like, I think Peter kind of caved to the pressure that when you have multiple people with all this books of statistics saying this is what girls want, this is what girls like, and girls are going to see our movies, Peter, you choose your battles.
Yes.
Making a movie, making a trilogy of movies especially, is a war. It is a huge war against time, money, publicity, marketing, studios, filmmakers, creativity versus accounting. So, it just feels like, there were some pressures, but I don't think Peter Jackson should be vilified and crucified for how Tauriel is. I know everyone says, it's Peter Jackson's Hobbit. Tauriel is a worthy addition to the Tolkien legendarium.
There are a lot of fascinating things going on in the 6 movies, the Hobbit films combined with the Lord of the Rings films. I think we might even go as far as to say that Peter Jackson's biggest mistake is that he made the Lord of the Rings films first. I think my logic is telling me that if he had made the Hobbit films first, he would have gotten mountains and mountains of praise. Maybe not for the 48 frames per second, but he would have gotten praise for, wow, putting together such a rich tapestry of a fantasy world with such attention to art direction and detail and the scope of characters written large and written very intimately and small. And then the three films would have barreled forward, forgive the use of the barrel, barreled forward into what would have been the amazingness of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it would have finished off with such a bang. He could have finished off his 6 films with such a hugeness and such a big bang, thank you, another geek reference, that nobody would be complaining. People really would look at the films differently.
And that's how new generations are.
The Hobbit films have been shot in the foot because of the perceived perfection that was reached. Oh, he achieved the unattainable with Lord of the Rings.
At the time.
He could never attain that again.
This is before,
everybody said that. Oh, he'll never attain the same level.
And this was before the Marvel
with the Lord of the
Cinematic
Rings.
Universe. This is before the Batman Begins trilogy. You know, this is before there was all these like series. Like Batman definitely wasn't a trilogy worth talking about when the Lord of the Rings came out. You know, X-Men had barely come out. The third Jurassic Park was like terrible. You know, no one had ever done 3
Was that the one that Joe
movies.
Dante directed?
Yeah. So no one had ever done 3 movies that were just perfection, and Peter Jackson did it. But it was a context of the time. You know, of course, Lord of the Rings movies are going to be better than The Hobbit. They always will because the books are. But
There's that.
But when the Lord of the Rings came out, the OneRing.net was right there front and center on the front lines of fandom, and I can tell you what, there are still fans who hate the Lord of the Rings films. Hobbits were never near Osgiliath. How dare you change the entire motivation of Faramir? You completely bastardized Faramir and his motivations. There are so many instances in Lord of the Rings where Peter Jackson ruined the entire intent and spirit of Tolkien's characters by moving and shifting things around. And some older fans still consider it unforgivable. And there's some people that have refused to ever watch it since the theatrical release because of that. But that was just one set of fans. Overall, society embraced Lord of the Rings and said, "This is film perfection. Great job. Thank you for introducing us." And Peter Jackson was celebrated. So here we are, 10 years later, and we're hearing the same arguments from that generation of fans now, saying, "Peter Jackson, how dare you put the characters over here? How dare you change that? Tolkien is perfection. You're messing with perfection." Well, he did the same things on Lord of the Rings. There are a lot of unforgivables in the Two Towers. Unforgivables when it comes to hardcore fans. And so
I still have one that I will immediately cite, that Frodo would never send Sam away.
Ever.
Frodo would never, ever, ever tell Sam, go home. That would never happen. That was a breakdown in the ethical universe of everything that's Tolkien.
We got a call on the hotline.
I don't feel the same way when I see that Keely and Tariel are, getting a little besotted with each other. I still don't feel
calling?
like that would be the worst crime.
Hi.
Hello, is this Tolkien girl?
Yeah.
Well, hello there. Welcome to the hotline, and welcome to Torn Tuesday, everybody.
Thanks.
So I'm surprised you're still in the chat. What's on your mind? How come you have strong feelings about this?
I could give you a whole folder of things I find wrong with the Hobbit movies.
And that's what we're saying, that there are a lot of things wrong with the Hobbit movies, just as there was with the Lord of the Rings. But Peter Jackson
But
should
there's-
not be vilified.
He should not be vilified. Can you take yourself to an imaginary place, Tolkien girl, for just a moment, and imagine you had never ever seen the Lord of the Rings movies, and you came in, maybe you're a young moviegoer, you're like a teenager, you're ready to go see the movies with your friends, maybe you're 14 or 15, and you guys go in and see the Hobbit films first, and then see Lord of the Rings films years later. I mean, don't you think that kind of progression through the movie landscape would have been a different way for you to digest all of that? Don't you think?
No, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that because for one, I am a teenager, so I can relate to how
Exactly.
going to see a movie for the first time can feel.
Yeah.
But also, I would have, when I was younger, I read both Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit.
How young?
So, I saw Lord of the Rings for the first time when I was 5 years old. My dad put it on for us, my siblings and I. And then when I was growing up, my mom and dad would read The Hobbit to me. And then
Excellent.
when I turned 10, I finished The Lord of the Rings for the first time.
Excellent. Wow.
But the thing is, even if I went to go see The Hobbit first, I feel like I still would have been just as disappointed with the movies as I am right now. Because I would have read the book. I would have known everything that's wrong. And sure, it would look cool. It would be Peter Jackson's universe. It would be Lord of the Rings. It would be Middle Earth put to screen. And sure, when it first came out, I would absolutely adore it. My friends can tell you, when the Hobbit movies first came out, I couldn't stop talking about them. But then I sat back and really looked at them and compared them to the books and just thought, what in the world happened? How could the director that made Lord of the Rings change this so much? My favorite children's book. How did this happen? And there are just so many things that I hate. Well, hate's a bit of a strong word, but very strongly dislike.
Oh no,
about The Hobbit.
hate is the strong
Don't-
word.
don't
and
mince.
There's a lot of fans that
Don't
share
mince
your
words.
frustrations. But
And that's okay.
I
It's
have
totally
to,
okay.
I have to go back to what you just said, is that you were introduced to Tolkien at 5 years old through the films first, the Lord of the Rings
Yeah.
films.
And then your dad or your mom or both were reading the chapters to you when you were young, and then you actually probably picked it up and reread it yourself.
So don't you think if you had seen the Hobbit films first before you had read any of the books that you would have been a little more patient with this adaptation? Because let's face it,
That's what I'm thinking.
The Hobbits, in Two Towers, the Hobbits going to Osgiliath is so far removed from everything. Like that's
Yeah, I know there's a lot wrong with Lord of the Rings as well. I know that there were deviations made, but it still worked. Peter Jackson made it work.
But the Hobbit works.
It doesn't feel like that at all in The Hobbit.
How,
There's so
what
many
doesn't
things
work
that
about
are
the Hobbit films?
unnecessary to add in.
Well, I get it. I get what you're saying. You've got on your hands 3 big old movies from a rather slender 230-page children's episodic
I think
story.
no, it's beyond that. You can take a 10-page story and make it a 2-hour movie. But I want to know,
That's happened.
what
That
you
has happened
feel
before.
that this movie it breaks down completely in this movie. What makes the Hobbit trilogy incomplete? What's so wrong with it?
It's just
It doesn't. You mean it just doesn't resemble the original book?
that, and when it boils down to it, the thing I loved most about The Hobbit is that, well, reading the book as a little kid, it gave me some of the best role models ever. It gave me Bilbo Baggins, the bravest person I've ever read about, and he was a role model for me growing up. And I just felt that when it boils down to it, if I'm extremely honest, in the movies, I just hate what they did. They made certain people more important than Bilbo, the central character of the book. And that just made it feel so bloated and wrong to me.
So you feel that there was just it was just a little too much away from the character that you loved about the book.
Well, yeah, Bilbo was the whole spirit of The Hobbit. He's what the book was about. It's his adventure. There shouldn't be all this stuff about the elves and all this, and having Azog in the movie. Don't even get me started on that. And if you want to make dwarves more important characters, sure. But at least have Bilbo still be the main character. Because it doesn't feel like he is in the last two movies.
Even with the complete adherence to the subplot with the Arkenstone, and even with the fact that the scene at the gate when Thorin gets so angry with Bilbo that he threatens to pick him up and cast him down off the side of the wall, which is like verbatim, word for word from Tolkien's book. I thought that was rather good, and I thought that was, really amazing to watch that dramatized with Martin Freeman being so wonderful.
I do agree with you there. That was one of my favorite scenes.
It was probably one of the best scenes.
In my opinion, in the last Hobbit movie, because it did follow the book.
Exactly.
It was the spirit of Tolkien. I could see what I read on screen.
Yes. So you preferred fidelity, and you would have preferred your Hobbit movie to have had more fidelity to the book. That's the big oomph of what you're saying.
Well, yeah.
I get it.
Adaptations are supposed to be as faithful as they can be, right?
Well,
that's a whole different discussion.
That's a fascinating idea. My instinct immediately is, yes, it would be wonderful if any adaptation would be, lavishly faithful to the original, but when you do so, you probably interrupt the flow of your storytelling, because even Professor Tolkien said in his published letters, which I have right here with me, that he was listening to the BBC radio dramatization in 1956. He was listening to The Lord of the Rings, and he said to people, I really think that the book is unsuitable for dramatization at all. And he really hated the voice actor who did Tom Bombadil. I remember that was very funny. He made some catty comments about that. But
so there's always been adaptations of this.
There's always been adaptations, and even when Professor Tolkien was alive, he was braced against the notion that people would adapt his works. And he may have instinctually felt that Lord of the Rings was not easily dramatized and maybe shouldn't have been, but he also knew, and he said this in a very important statement, he said, I was making more or less a big interconnected mythology for England, and I wanted to make these cycles of mythology big enough so that the scope of it would be large enough for other minds, quote, other minds and other hands, wielding paint and music and drama, could, unquote, could get their hands on his mythologies and breathe life into it. And so he was braced for the ultimate end, that his stuff was going to get picked up and adapted by other people.
So I think,
for better or for worse.
Go ahead.
Don't get me wrong. I love Peter Jackson for what he's done. I love him for putting Middle Earth to screen. I love that he did make the Hobbit movies because he felt that we needed to see them, that we wanted to see them, because we really did. But I can't help but feel that now that everything is said and done and I've seen all the movies, that maybe, just maybe, the Hobbit movies shouldn't have been made.
That's a very, you are throwing down the gauntlet today, Tolkien girl. Fascinating.
Well, I know other people are trying to call in, but thank you. We're gonna touch on that, but we're gonna jump off the phone right now.
We'll close the phone call, but listen, Tolkien girl, I have another point to make. Well, thank you for calling, but I'm gonna follow this up. Thank you for saying that, and thank you for calling. Thank you for calling. It's wonderful to have a contrasting opinion, which is very good, very healthy. Now, thank you.
Good week, you guys.
Lovely,
All right, you
lovely,
too.
always lovely to have you here. Here's what I've decided, and I said this to you earlier today, didn't I, Justin? When you're looking at the 3 Hobbit films, you know what I've decided? What you're getting are 3 more Lord of the Rings films. These adaptations...
It's more Middle Earth.
It's just
That's
more Middle Earth.
everything we want.
Let me tell you something. I'm going to say it right now so that all the, Peter Jackson haters can have something to chew on, because they love chewing me up like a doggy chew toy. That's what somebody said once. It's like,
what are you going to say?
these 6 movies are not even Hobbit and Lord of the Rings movies. That distinction should be left behind forever. What you have now are 6 Lord of the Rings movies.
Yes.
I've decided that The Hobbit movies, Unexpected Journey, Desolation of Smaug, and of course Battle of the Five Armies, are telling us the story of the ring. It may not be Bilbo-centric because it's deliberately not Bilbo-centric. It is a much bigger story, bigger canvas, more people, more players being affected by the ring. We're more interested in the ring. Peter Jackson is giving us deliberate threads that are leading up to everything that's resolved in Lord of the Rings, and I think I finally decided that his mistake was using the title The Hobbit. He should have just used the title The Lord of the Rings pre-Part A, Part B, Part C, or something else, because what you end up with are 6 movies about the saga of everybody being screwed over by Sauron and his messy, nasty plans and his horrible, horrible ring. Everybody's getting their lives adversely affected, and you know what? It's less about the contents of the Hobbit book being self-contained Hobbit movie. What you're getting is the ring, the ring, the ring in 6 major parts.
Things
so
are
there
always
it is.
going to be
That's what we've got.
Even
we've got 6 Rings movies.
Avengers Age of Ultron, Tony Stark never created Ultron. That has nothing.
I know.
There's no connection in the history of Marvel. That is a total falsity that Tony Stark had anything to do with the creation of Ultron.
Or his artificial intelligence ended up becoming Ultron. Yes.
Yeah, nothing to do with it in the history of the written word.
Not canonical.
But you watch that movie in Avengers Age of Ultron and you say, you know what? For all the movies that we have come up to this, that makes sense. I believe that. That makes sense. In the context of this cinematic universe, that makes sense. And Peter Jackson has a cinematic universe.
He does now. A deliberate cinematic universe.
But he's always had it, and he made conscious decisions to play in the world, in that universe that Tolkien created using Tolkien's own rules.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, I can't find a lot of instances where Peter Jackson has thrown out the rules of engagement as created by Tolkien.
If he threw out the rules of engagement as much as people criticize him for, you wouldn't have had that dialogue where Gandalf stands at the gate and says, "Good morning," to build that, which is exactly like...
And even the quiet moment at the end of Battle of Five Armies.
Oh, I love that quiet moment.
A bookend.
Tolkien girl, you and I agree 100% that the best part of the Hobbit films are when they hew closest to Tolkien's exact words and exact moments. The riddle game, the episode where, Thorin is so angry with Bilbo betraying him and giving the Arkenstone away. Because those words and those moments, those episodic moments reflect exactly what Tolkien wrote, that is when those movies work best as an adaptation of The Hobbit. But when the movies are working on a larger engine, a bigger engine and a bigger platform of storytelling, Peter Jackson's concerns are way beyond Bilbo at that point, and it's pretty clear that we have a 6-movie set telling us the history of the War of the Ring, and Peter even actually said in an interview, I think it was Premiere Magazine or something, he said, this opening salvo, the Battle of the Five Armies, is actually the opening of...
Sauron.
The War of the Ring. He's like, this is the first opening of the War of the Ring.
And
I'm like, okay, well...
And I'm sure Tolkien intended that.
Maybe. Well, no, Professor Tolkien had no idea he was going to create the War of the Ring.
Yeah, he didn't.
At the time when he wrote The Hobbit. Thank you, Emily. Emily wants to come in on Skype.
We just, when we posted...
Hold on, Emily. We'll get your call in 1 second. We'll call you back in a minute.
When we at the start of the show, we posted on our Facebook, join the conversation, and already our Facebook page is exploding with vitriol for Peter Jackson. Except our friend here on our Facebook page, Reg Schofield, he says, "What has amazed me has been the vitriol spewed Peter's way, calling into question his motivation, talent, and character. Fine, critic the movies, but be a critique the movies.
Fine, critique the movies,
but be about the movie. Bottom line, in 50 years, people will still love the Tolkien works, and many will still enjoy Peter's adaptations. I, for one, enjoyed the movies immensely. Would I have changed some things? Sure, but I have neither the talent, drive, nor vision of Jackson." He kind of hits it right where we're trying to go. Is that look? It's okay to not like the movies. It's okay to have serious issues with some of the stuff that are in the Hobbit films. Just as a lot of fans had some serious issues with the Lord of the Rings, but to spew this vitriol, how Peter's a hack, he's proven himself, he's too big for his britches, he gave up on this film, he no longer is trying to earn people's respect, he's made his $1 billion, he doesn't need to work anymore, he doesn't need to try hard. I think that's inappropriate and false. Peter Jackson was pushing the boundaries, and just as he was 15 years ago, and he was playing he was still playing in the sandbox with Tolkien's rules of the sandbox.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like he understood he had to use a very, very limited application of the giant eagles. Professor Tolkien also understood the danger he was in by using such a big deus ex machina with the giant eagles, and he also used them sparingly. And so the filmmakers were also aware of things that were happening in the Tolkien universe. Do you know what Philippa said to me what Philippa Boyens literally said to me,
literally, not
when
figuratively.
she didn't write an email, she spoke to me and she said that her main worry was, did we do okay? She said, did we do all right? And I said, yeah, they're great fun. This is great. Having a great fun. I have to admit that I still have a nostalgic, heartfelt love for the 90-minute adaptation that the Rankin and Bass animators did back in the 70s. And that very succinctly tells the Hobbit story all by itself as a Hobbit story. And it doesn't feel like it's part of the Lord of the Rings. But she also said to me, I was worried that little lie, that Bilbo says at the end to Gandalf, at the very end of Battle of the Five Armies, Bilbo says, you don't have to worry about that ring, Gandalf, I lost it. I lost it in the battle. I don't know where it is. It's gone. And she looked at me, she's like, do you think that lie from Bilbo was out of character, was inappropriate for him?
No.
And I thought, this is fascinating. She's not worried about me, a fan, being pissed off about Tauriel and Keeley having a triangle with unrequited Legolas in the corner. You know what? She was more concerned about Bilbo's integrity being besmirched as the character lying to Gandalf's face about the ring being lost. And this is very interesting.
It sets it up right up going into Fellowship of the Ring, where there's multiple instances in the first 20 minutes of Fellowship where Bilbo is like,
yeah,
I don't know where the ring is.
Why do you think the Hobbit film even has Elijah Wood show up in the opening? And that's because we're going to tell the Hobbit films, but we're not going to stay focused on the Hobbit. We're going to stay focused on the ring and how it impacts all these other people's lives. It's especially apparent with that little lie, that white lie that Bilbo says to Gandalf at the end. And of course, Gandalf knows he's lying. He's like, I know you're lying.
Let me ask you this.
But the color of the ring's influence just beginning to creep over Bilbo in such an odd way, that's fascinating to me.
It's a perfect start.
And I told her I don't have a problem with that.
Let me ask you this.
I don't have a problem with that. I thought it was fascinating.
In the Red Book of Westmarch, there are 3 authors: Bilbo, Frodo, Sam.
Correct. Bilbo, Frodo, Sam.
At the end of Lord of the Rings, Frodo gives the book to Sam and says, the final pages are for you.
Mm-hmm. The last pages are for you.
So, if I recall correctly, The Hobbit, in the context of that universe, The Hobbit was written by Bilbo,
mm-hmm.
and The Lord of the Rings was written by Frodo.
Yes.
And then the final chapters were written by Sam.
Yes.
So, it makes sense to have Elijah Wood show up at the beginning of The Hobbit, because it's ultimately it's Frodo's entire discovery of the story of Bilbo's story, then Frodo's journey,
mm-hmm.
and then Frodo handing it off to Sam.
Mm-hmm.
The whole Middle Earth film saga
mm-hmm.
is Frodo and the Ring. It's Frodo and the Ring.
All 6 films are more about, actually, I take the Darth Vader perspective, where they say the 3 first Star Wars films from the 70s and 80s are not about Luke or his sister, Leia. They're about Anakin, about Darth Vader. I think all 6 Middle-earth films are about Sauron and his machinations. Just the way that Darth Vader's machinations kick everything into gear. As an antagonist, he's a great antagonist. Vader makes everything else happen in the Star Wars films, and everybody else is reacting to what Vader's doing. Now I'm starting to see much more clearly in these 6 Peter Jackson films that everyone is responding to what Sauron is doing, and he's screwing up everybody's lives like he always was, like he wants to do. That's Sauron's greatest raison d'etre. His reason for being is to screw up other people's lives and mess with them and cause havoc, damage, chaos, fear, mistrust, and that's what Sauron does. And it looks like Peter was pretty good at putting the Frodo, Bilbo, Ring storyline together, and also saying, look at these innocent lives, these innocent characters, which represent that great truism, that hobbit quality that Tolkien presented. They are the only buffer in the world that can withstand the machinations and the evil of what Sauron wants to do and his overreaching plans. And again, he brings it right back to the hobbits. I think overall the 6 films are less successful at adapting The Hobbit, and they're more successful at integrating bigger world, happenings based upon Sauron's interest and motivations. That's what I'm sensing. Don't you think?
I think so,
Do
too.
you get some of that?
Spirited Books, please give us a call in the chat room.
Skype is open. The hotline
Skype
is open.
The One Ring Net, all one word. You'll see the name pop up, Barnum and Butterbur on Skype. And
Call us.
You can text us and call us at 530-64
So,
Frodo.
you know what?
I
just want to shift the context. Instead of hating the Hobbit films for being poor,
You can
bloated
hate the films, but
you
don't
can
hate
say-
Peter Jackson. I want to bring this
Yeah.
back to the filmmakers.
Yeah,
all
well, I
right?
mean,
A lot of people,
don't hate the filmmakers.
and
Just say, look at what the
feel like
film is
we
for what it is.
I feel like we got somewhere with Tolkien Girl on the phone call because she came in at the start of this conversation hating on the movie and hating Peter Jackson and how he ruined, and by the end of our phone call, Tolkien Girl was like, I don't really hate Peter Jackson. I hate what he did with the movies.
You know what? I still prefer the animated 90-minute Rankin Bass Hobbit film. I do prefer it as an adaptation of The Hobbit. But hey there, Emily. What do you think? All the way from lovely England. What do you think? Let me turn the volume up here.
Earlier on, when Justin was saying about kids are going to go to the films first, I sort of agree with that because I see a lot more kids more interested in watching movies than books. I don't agree that everyone would go for the movies first, but I sort of do agree that there'll be a lot of people that go for the movies before the books.
That's just the society that we live in.
Times are changing.
Went to the movies before the books, and I actually like it because it's sort of like you get the movie, and then by reading the books, you get sort of more.
Right. So is Peter Jackson evil personified?
I have no problem with Peter Jackson. What my problems are, I didn't have a problem really with the first film, other than I thought Azog was just too CGI'd.
Yeah, there's that. There's the problem with the production was rushed with their work on that. Yeah.
Yeah. With the second film, I could have done with, and the third, I could have done without a love triangle. I was happy they were going to put a Tauriel in. I was not happy with what they did. Scrap the love triangle.
Oh, are you happier that the love triangle was completely deflated and didn't even become fully manifest? It would have been a horrible mess if it really had become a real love affair. I'm glad that it didn't really happen.
I'm totally glad it didn't happen, but still, I did not like it. I mean, the fact, why would a dwarf be... Well, why would Tauriel... Why would an elf, a high elf... I know she's not the highest, but an elf be crying over the dead body of a dwarf?
Can you appreciate her?
Sense.
Can you appreciate her existence at least?
I was totally happy, and I was all for there being a female warrior elf. I had no problem with them putting that in from the start.
And Evangeline Lilly portrayed her with an excellent temperament, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought she did a great job.
Also, I sort of agree with your comment earlier in just Alfred was just too much.
Too much.
I was like, no.
So,
No.
was there
And the
anything?
part-
Was there anything in the Lord of the Rings that was unforgivable? Because again, Osgiliath, hobbits at Osgiliath, unforgivable.
Sam being turned away by Frodo and being sent
Sam
home.
being turned away from Frodo was a bit. I mean, it didn't annoy me as much, but it was sort of like, eh?
I screamed. I screamed in the theater.
It's like. And
No!
it's
I said no.
I was like, no.
So why does
Why-
Lord of the
why
Rings
would
get a
you do
pass?
that?
Why do you give
you know what?
Lord of the Rings a pass, but the Hobbit it gets so much?
I'm still
Just
I'm still
the
pissed off.
number of boo-boos, as children will put it, the number of boo-boos they did to the Hobbit.
The number of
They-
boo-boos.
there's just as many boo-boos
In Lord of the Rings, they
Rings.
cut out Tom Bombadil. They cut out the scouring of the Shire. The
There's
whole big chapter at the end. They cut out. They messed up some other things, but still, we universally
But
praise.
I didn't read the books first, and
So there you go.
For me, because I didn't read the books first, I'm looking at just the movies standalone, and I just thought, no, to certain things.
Well,
It's like,
so it sounds like that. You have some issues, as everybody has with the Hobbit movies. But as far as Peter Jackson's concerned, he's not the great evil person that ruined
no,
Tolkien.
I have no problem. I want to meet PJ, and I want to get his autograph and have my photo taken with him at some Comic Con, and I have no issues with him. He's just a director making a movie.
Mm-hmm.
He's not. He didn't. He has certain amount to say, but he didn't create the Azog. He didn't make a fool of Alfred.
Yeah, it's
He just
he's just a sub creator playing in the sandbox that Tolkien created, and he did his own job. It wasn't a bad job. Some people would say it's a good job. It wasn't a good job, but it's not worth the vitriol that is spewed.
Oh,
at
no,
him.
I think people who are just going to complain are just people who are complainers. They're not happy unless they're complaining. We often say, like, me and my mum are often saying about my dad, he's not happy unless he's complaining about something.
That's funny.
And that's half the internet. Well, thank you for calling, Emily. We appreciate
But
your.
yeah, scrap Alfred, get rid of the love triangle, and have Azog as he was supposed to be, and I think that would have got a lot less criticism.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you for your input. And,
Well said.
We're gonna let a couple other people call in.
Well said. Very good, Emily.
You know, we got a question in the chat room. Justin, why? Joanna asks, why should anything be considered a pass? And that's my question. Why does Peter Jackson get a pass on all the egregious changes he made to Lord of the Rings? Not only
Well-
deleting characters, but changing their entire motivations and totally destroying the bond of friendship, sending Sam away. Like, this is like just.
How about having?
know,
how about well, during our
But in The Hobbit, he doesn't get a pass. People are just like, we hate Peter Jackson.
well, when
He ruined my childhood.
when we found out that elves were being sent to Helm's Deep, and when we saw all these things happening that were different, we complained a lot. And the internet and the one, of course, us at theonering.net, we're a very big part of that echo chamber of voices on the internet, especially with fandom. We were very much, aware of what was being changed and altered from the book, and that was all we wanted to know. All of us book fans were crazy trying to find out what's been going on with Peter and
Look,
Fran and
I
Philippa.
think
But
Tolkien Girl says Lord of the Rings gets a pass because it was the movie. It was the movie that couldn't be filmed. The Hobbit is the Star Wars prequels of Middle Earth, and I think
Well,
my argument.
that idea exists only because we knew Star Wars prequels were made that way.
And I think there, I think it just has to do with your age and your level of fandom. Because book book people that grew up with Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings and the cartoon Hobbit,
Yes.
and grew up with the books, when they watched Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, they were just like, this guy is terrible. He destroyed Tolkien's intention. That Osgiliath, he's just like, how can he get so much love for this? And now we're seeing the same exact conversation happen with a new set of fans, an older set of fans. You know, saying, how can he get so much praise for those Hobbit movies? They're atrocious. And I'm just like, you know what? I just think it just has to do with the age. It's a more reflection of you, the fan, than Peter Jackson, the filmmaker. I think there's a lot of people
That's fair.
that could have wrecked Tolkien on film. Like, wrecked. And there's a lot of filmmakers.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that could have been done much, much worse
than
what we got.
And
Much worse.
I give an example of, like, you know, like the Wachowskis. You know, they're creative guys, but you put them on anything like Cloud Atlas or the Sean Bean movie Jupiter Ascending, and it just falls to pieces, even with complete creative license and extra budget and stuff. Like, there's a lot of movies that have failed. The Golden Compass. How about Avatar: The Last Airbender? You know, there are so many examples of celebrated stories and books and cartoons with accomplished, very capable directors and storytellers, and it just and great acting, great actors.
Yes.
In that context, with the best visual effects budget you could possibly imagine, and the movies are terrible. And they fall flat. And my point is, Peter Jackson did magic with The Hobbit. The movies are capable. The movies hold up.
Okay, Marfels, I hear
on
what
their own.
I hear what you're saying.
And the movies, they might not be as celebrated as Lord of the Rings, but the Hobbit movies stand on their own. They're capable movies. He didn't mess them up. He was true to Tolkien, and Peter Jackson should get a little more credit and be celebrated for not messing up Tolkien's legacy.
For not really messing up. In fact, contrary opinion is always welcome. Everybody going to have a different opinion, and they feel different, strong feelings and very much attachments to Tolkien's stories. That's why we're fans. That's why we identify ourselves as ringers, because we love Professor Tolkien, and his books are sacrosanct. They will always be there. They can never be altered or messed up. They're always the pure words and the pure vision of the author that we'll always have to go back to, no matter what. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful, even though the 3 Hobbit movies may have been unnecessarily bigger and bolder and a lot busier than they needed to be, and I still prefer my original adaptation from the 70s because it was succinct, a proper adaptation of the book. I think that you will have a much different appreciation of the Hobbit films if you forever in your mind never think of them as Hobbit films. Think of them as Lord of the Rings films. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. There.
In that order.
In that order.
Just like the Star Wars saga should be watched.
If you can train your brain, yes, if you can train your brain, and if you can go through the experiment of showing some of your other friends, go ahead, try it sometime. Take a newbie on a trip to Middle-earth, and don't start them with Fellowship of the Ring. Start the newbies with Hobbit.
Our Skype is on, Spirited.
Please, Spirited Book. Please enjoy us. Enjoy another Skype conversation with us.
You're logged in as Cliff. You're not even logged in as the One Ring.
Well, that's the one that everybody uses. No,
log in as the One Ring.
Do I have another account? I don't know if I even have another account. Let's see if I can add that.
No wonder we're not getting anybody's calls. Cliff isn't even logged in as the One Ring net.
Oh, really?
Oh, dear.
Settings. Let's see. Connection.
Cliff,
about.
I can't believe you.
Where do I open up?
Where do you log out?
Here. Available.
Sign out.
View profile. Sign out.
Sign out.
Okay.
Sign out. Woo.
I will just sign back in.
Sign out.
Okay. Hey, I just got a text message from my newbie friend, and I asked him, "What are your final thoughts seeing these 3 Hobbit films?" Do you know what he said? He said, "These are great movies, but in my opinion, I think By watching The Hobbit first, I was able to understand. I will be able. This is coming from my friend Jose.
Where's
who
your
is
keyboard?
It's you threw it away over there. It's connected.
Isn't there a software keyboard?
Put that keyboard. You'll have to turn that off. You'll have to either turn that Bluetooth keyboard off entirely. Okay. I've got it. Thank you. Let me help you, Justin, dear. There you go. Turn the Bluetooth keyboard off. Now, my friend who saw these films, the Hobbit films, and he's never even seen Lord of the Rings yet, he's about to go on another journey, and he's going to borrow the extended editions of the Blu-rays, and he's going to watch all of them with my guidance, and I'm going to loan him a map. This is what he said about the Hobbit films. Great movies, but in my opinion, I think by watching The Hobbit first, I will be able to understand The Lord of the Rings way more, and it got me excited to watch The Lord of the Rings. And then his next text was, "Do you work tomorrow?" Do you work tomorrow? So,
but if you go to our
it's
Facebook page,
fascinating.
you can see the amount of. I mean, you can tell who the trolls are, but it's not just like 2 or 3 trolls. There's a significant portion of fandom that can't deal. They just can't. I hit the green button.
There you go.
Hello.
Hello there. Welcome.
Hello, Spirited Book 3635.
Welcome aboard to our show.
Hey guys.
Hey.
So what's
So,
up?
where do we even begin? The microphone is yours. Go
It's
for
all
it.
yours, buddy.
wow. Oh man. So TG and I, Tolkien girl, she and I were very good friends, but I think we have completely very different opinions on The Hobbit.
Fair
So
enough.
what you're
movie as a
saying
whole.
is that you used to be friends, but then you like The Hobbit, she doesn't. And now you guys no
No,
longer.
we're still friends. We're still friends.
That's good.
We overlook it. No, but I've read The Hobbit. That was the first Lord of the Rings film or book. Sorry, I read, and it's still my favorite book.
Hmm.
And I love the movies. They're just fun. It's more content of the world we all know and love, and I like it. And Peter Jackson doesn't deserve the hate he gets for making these films. I mean, he did something that nobody could expect that he could do. He made these wonderful 3 movies of Lord of the Rings, and nobody expected him to do the same to achieve that greatness again. But he did his best. He made The Hobbit. And I like them. And I ask a lot of my friends who are big moviegoers and not necessarily book readers, and they say, "Oh yeah, I like them too." And yeah, I like them as a whole, and they're still fun.
So why do you think there's such vitriol against Peter Jackson over these movies? Where do you think this is sourced from?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Why do you think there's so much hate on Peter Jackson with these particular films?
It's hard to tell exactly, but maybe in the love triangle, like I personally didn't like that much. But it's one portion. I overlooked it at one point, and I'm just like, okay, it's still a movie, it's fun. But then there was also Alfred. Alfred was fun at the beginning, but then there was a point where I kind of went, it's too much.
Yeah.
What else?
I felt that too.
There was added content with Legolas and Toriel. I like Toriel, but maybe the whole love triangle again wasn't needed. But as a character, Toriel was pretty cool.
Yeah. So what? But everyone can have issues with certain parts of the movies. Again, like Osgiliath and like a lot of stuff in Two Towers. So the question is why is fandom rejecting Peter Jackson right now?
It's hard to tell exactly, because the fandom is so big. Everyone can have their own opinion. I don't know.
It's a tough one. I mean, and you can see these comments. They don't just pop up on our Facebook page and on our website and on our boards, but like on Reddit and any community that starts talking about The Hobbit, it's just like Peter Jackson went full George Lucas. It's like, well, these guys are creators. Creation is a very difficult job, and the movies are capable. They hold up, and I don't feel like Peter Jackson's getting the credit that he deserves for holding it together.
They were no. He definitely deserves praise for making those movies. I like The Hobbit. They were fun.
They are
fun
fun.
for movies because I'm more of a moviegoer than a book reader.
Yes, I like you already.
Yeah.
I hear you. So, do you think that that Peter Jackson will be vilified for a little while because Tolkien fans, being what they are, they're gonna hate, they're gonna be pissed off. Haters be hating, and there's it's gonna happen for a little while now that like that little sample I read from the Dark Horizons movie review where they really lambasted Mr. Jackson for his excessive excess. But in the end, do you think that the proof in the pudding will be when newcomers will approach these films and watch them and absorb them for the first time, and then we're going to get to gauge their reactions by letting them watch Hobbit films first and then Lord of the Rings, and they'll be the ultimate judge of how everything works together?
Yeah, funny you say that.
Because
on
we can't.
Iron
We can't do that
recently,
because we've been spoiled by
s-
seeing
someone
Rings first.
came in and they said, "Oh yeah, I just finished watching all 6 films," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, which one do you find better?" And he said, "Oh, I like the Hobbit ones better."
Really?
Ooh.
Really?
I don't remember who it was, but it just showed up.
Really?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the hate is just coming from fans that have a particular memory of a certain time in their life and coming into Middle Earth at a certain time in their life, and anything other than that is less. And I think new fans are having the same experiences that we had in 2001, but they're having it with The Hobbit. And I think Peter Jackson deserves some credit for not ruining these movies.
Yeah, probably.
So, all right. Well, I appreciate you calling in, and hope you enjoyed this conversation today.
Yeah, it was fun. Actually, I had a lot of fun today.
Great,
Awesome.
man. It's always great to have you guys join us on the show, and I appreciate that. How about that? We can be fans, and we can be a unified fandom. I think this is one of the overall things that Justin wants to create in today's conversation.
Aravandi says it best. Haters gonna hate, but I'm just gonna shake it off.
Shake it off. Well, you know what? Why can't we be a unified fandom where we all love Tolkien? We just all start there.
And Peter Jackson. We love Tolkien, and we love Peter Jackson.
Let's
because
start there.
The love of Tolkien is unarguable. Like, there's no debate there. The debate is on the merits of Peter Jackson. And the fact is, he didn't mess this up. Give that guy a little credit.
I agree. He didn't mess it up, but he did something that you guys didn't want. Let's just say that. He did not mess up the Hobbit films, but he deliberately made other Hobbit films, which is not what you guys wanted. You guys wanted a simple adaptation of The Hobbit, which is itself a more simplified, idiom of storytelling than The Lord of the Rings was. It's a completely different idiomatic type of J.R.R. Tolkien. Oh, only the opening couple of chapters of The Fellowship of the Ring have the flavor and the feeling of the way The Hobbit is written.
Fushina
That's
makes a
it.
great point. Says we are more unified than other fandoms.
We should
whether
be.
it's Harry Potter or Justin Bieber or anybody else.
And I think it's pronounced Focoena.
Folkowena.
I think it's Focoena. I think that's how it's pronounced. I've been learning. In the end, Peter Jackson made 6 Lord of the Rings films. I've always said for a long time that The Hobbit that was delivered to our door was Hobbit 2.0, a really pumped up, adrenaline-fueled version of
No film is perfect,
Hobbit.
but some are better than others. Only to you, I think the Hobbit movies, in their own context, to a certain generation, are as good as the Lord of the Rings films were to us.
Indeed. Hello, Pete, Northrunner. It's really good to see you, Northrunner. Thank you for coming to our excellent party back in February, and glad to have you back on the live show.
And as we close the show, on our Facebook
and
page, Sandra Joyner,
let's bring up Sandra. I like her, by the way.
I am 72 years old,
Brilliant.
and I watch the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit trilogies all the time. I
Mm-hmm.
have the hardbound books, and I enjoy both the books and the movies. What
Mm-hmm.
I like is not changed by those who choose to criticize Peter Jackson. The fact that they have made the amount of money that they have, and the
Mm-hmm.
loyal fans that they have, is proof enough that they are loved by many. Some people just have to hate on people as a hobby.
Yeah, as a hobby.
And I think a lot of people can appreciate this. Some people have fathers or brothers or family members that, just nothing will ever make them happy. But I think overall, I think the supporters of Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies, we need to become a little more vocal and debate and call out anybody that's hating on Peter Jackson and say, you know what, you're wrong. Peter Jackson didn't mess up these films. They still made $1 billion, and they're still beloved by many. And everyone has issues with the Lord of the Rings films, Osgiliath and the breadcrumbs and everything like that. So
the Lumbus crumbs, yes.
So there's so much things. But thank you for joining us every Tuesday, 5 p.m. Pacific.
This was a fascinating conversation. And you guys always remember that when Professor Tolkien was alive, he had to grit his teeth. And you had to deal with the fact that his work was being adapted by others. And he sold off the farm for £100,000.
And he put his kids through college.
And he paid for their inheritance tax. He put his kids through college, and that was about it. And it was a paltry sum, considering what the property is now worth today, in the way it's monetized and used today. But I'll tell you something. At the time when Professor Tolkien was alive, he did have an expectation that he would leave behind such a big piece of mythology and storytelling that ultimately other people might take their hands to it.
He wanted this.
He did.
At the end of the day, Tolkien wanted people to play in his sandbox and adhere to the rules, and Peter Jackson did just that.
And I love Peter Jackson's work, especially for his eye at casting and him getting the right people together on his team to work with him. If Peter Jackson had not done what he had done with the art department, with John Howe, Alan Lee, and Dan Henna, and the wonderful people working at Weta,
and
with
Ralph Bakshi's artwork.
And Ralph Bakshi's artwork, which inspired all those people that were pulled together at Weta. And if he had not cast Christopher Lee and Ian McKellen, if Peter Jackson had not put Howard Shore to work on building this cinematic universe, we wouldn't be here now talking in this way. I'm grateful, and I'm very happy that Peter gave us Hobbit 2.0, but you guys should go to bed and sleep comfortably, renaming the films in your sleep. And when you go to dream time, wake up and think to yourself, oh, the Hobbit movies aren't Hobbit movies. They're all Lord of the Rings movies, all 6 of them.
Lord of the Rings.
It's all Sauron 100% of the time.
It's the Lord of the Rings saga.
And that's why it begins and ends with Bilbo holding that ring, looking for that ring. His relationship with the ring is the first visual thing we get, and it's the last visual thing we get in these Hobbit movies. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? It tells you it's about the ring.
It tells you
not
that
about Bilbo.
Fandom is here to stay, and we are more united than most others. And
yes,
we
are.
appreciate you guys joining us every Tuesday, 5 p.m. for Meltdown Comics in the middle of Hollywood. I'm Justin. You can follow me at Justin's Big Idea.
And I'm Clifford. You can follow me on Twitter at QuickBeam2000. QuickBeam2000. I'm still pissed off that he didn't kill the dragon at the end of the second film. That was just that pissed me off.
That's not as bad as some of the Osgiliath things. But at the end of the day, the hobbits had to go to Osgiliath so we could get the greatest soliloquy in modern times
from Samwise.
From Samwise Gamgee.
That was juicy good, and what a great way to end the film.
Mr. Frodo, we shouldn't even be here.
And everybody in the room said, "Yeah, you shouldn't be there."
But the tears. And if Smaug had to live so that we may have seen a great action centerpiece at the beginning of Botfa, then that it is. So I appreciate Peter Jackson. It was his decisions to be made. The movies are thoroughly enjoyable. You can pick them up anytime. You can watch them. You can watch them with your kids, your friends, your aunts, your uncles, your nieces, your nephews, and everyone will have a good time. So if you had a good time joining us, thank you. Every Tuesday, 5 p.m. Pacific.
Yes, indeed.
We're here.
We're always here.
And I'm going to go shut off the computer over there.
It is an exciting time in Tolkien fandom. We've got more mischief coming up. I would like to reach out before the year is over. You know what we should do, Justin? We should reach out to Philippa and see if she'll join the show and talk about all these ultimate fateful decisions and world building for the cinema, because she has a perspective more unique than others. It's fascinating. I love having you guys on the show. Thank you, Justin, for co-hosting with me. follow me, QuickBeam 2000. He's Justin's big idea. And Pete, thank you for joining us. And Tolkien Girl, Idril, Marfles, all our wonderful friends in Spirited Book 635. Anytime you're in town, I'm going to buy you a proper pint of 1420, and we'll sit down and we'll talk about what's good and what's bad in cinematic universe of Middle-earth. Well, let's worry about Age of Ultron next week. We'll worry about that next week. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Cheers.